Welcome to the collection of the wildest and craziest AITA Reddit stories of all time. From wild betrayals to shocking twists, these tales will leave you questioning who is really in the wrong. Let's dive in together. The first story for this collection is from he_not_man. AITA. For telling my roommate not let in her boyfriend who is a meth addict and has been involved in pipe bomb explosions. My best friend, 21F, and I, 23NB, decided to move in with each other in August. A boundary that I set since the beginning is that I don't want meth in any iteration in our house. She has been talking to this guy for a little over a month now, and he seemed nice enough at first, until she told me that he has offered her meth multiple times. She tells me this isn't a big deal, because he's a recovering addict who has been clean as far as she knows. He didn't have meth on him when he asked her if she wanted to use with him, and this is just how addicts are. Then the day she brought him over, she told me that he was making pipe bombs, threw one out of his home window, causing the house to shake and car alarms to go off, and then tried to teach her how to make them. After I called her out, she told me that she was being overdramatic at the time, and that it wasn't a pipe bomb, and was actually a firework, but I have a hard time believing this because of the surrounding statements she made. Side note: my initial reaction was very angry and unkind, and I said some things that hurt her. I genuinely regret this, and I apologized. I should have put the phone away until I was calm, but I had a hard time doing this because she woke me up at midnight and then kept me up with the noise before I had to wake up at 4 a.m. for my morning shift. When I asked her who she had over, she joked, "I figured this way there would be no." This was a big trigger for my emotional and unkind reaction. Now her rebuttal to me was that I don't have the right to tell her who she can have over since we both pay rent, and he hasn't done any of the concerning behavior in our house, so I have nothing to worry about. She has called me manipulative for using the word boundary, that I'm trying to control who she can hang out with, and that I'm using her words against her. I genuinely don't understand this. She only said I was using her words against her when I brought up how she told me she experienced cravings when he offered her meth, and I haven't tried to tell her to stop seeing him. I've advised her against it as a friend, especially since she is also a recovering addict who is currently on probation. But when it comes to me not wanting him in our house, my reasoning is for specifically my safety. Basically, I need someone who is not biased towards me to give it to me straight. Am I being manipulative? And if not, am I overreacting? OP is not the AH for prioritizing their safety and setting boundaries about a meth-using, pipe bomb-making individual. Their concerns are valid and reasonable, especially since their roommate's actions could jeopardize both safety and legal consequences for them. As for scores, I would rate OP's roommate 3.5 and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump onto the next story from flashy_bat_3443. AITA for agreeing to separate from my wife when she brought it up for the 4th time, and then sticking to it when she subsequently changed her mind? Me, 40M, and my wife, 37F, have been together for 10 years, and we have 2 boys, 8 and 5. Recently, things have been tough. I think we had both withdrawn from each other gradually over time, without really noticing that it had happened. We were sleeping in separate bedrooms, primarily her choice. She was sleeping in late most days, particularly at the weekend, and I was doing a lot of activities with the kids without her. I work, and she doesn't. Never had a problem with it, and was happy to support her, but I was getting up every day to get the kids ready for school. Sometimes she would roll out of bed and take them while I got ready for work. Sometimes she wouldn't, and I would just take them. Similar routine at bedtime. I would put the kids to bed, read them stories, etc., and get them to sleep. Happy to do it. The 3 of us would do things together at the weekends without her, particularly in the mornings. She wasn't completely absent, but it got to the point where the kids were making comments about it, saying, "Why does Mum never want to come with us? Why is she sleeping all the time?" So I suppose I was becoming more withdrawn and emotionally separate, and she was too. She would sit and scroll through her phone, or watch TikTok in the evenings after the kids were in bed. We weren't connecting as we used to. Then came the angry outbursts over seemingly trivial things. An Amazon order turned up while I was out that she didn't know about, and my phone was blown up over it. I didn't reply to a text quickly enough while I was at work, and she would rant about it for an hour or two. My family would come out to visit us. We live abroad. and she would ask at the last minute that they stay in a hotel instead of at our house. To be fair, she suffers from anxiety, and I have tried repeatedly to get her to have therapy for it. She gets medication from the doctor, but that's as far as she seems to want to go to try and resolve things. So I have been as supportive as I can be, listening to all the past traumas, etc., but knowing that they weren't really being solved or dealt with. You can't make someone go to therapy. I only encouraged her as much as I could. The angry outbursts started getting more frequent, and historically, I would always try and placate her as much as possible to keep the peace. But I started getting a little defensive about it and standing up for myself, which really started escalating things. Just pushing back a little bit. That is saying, no, my family cannot book a hotel 24 hours before they are supposed to stay with us, which we agreed to months ago, led to several claims that she was going to leave me, that I had changed, and I wasn't the person she married anymore, etc. After several episodes of this, where she even told our oldest son that we were divorcing about 60 seconds after she told me, upsetting him greatly, she did it again about a week ago. I decided that I would take a stand, and I agreed with her, said that she was right, and we should separate. She went to bed early, and we didn't talk all night. The next morning, she was hoping for my usual rapprochement, but I said that you made it clear how you felt last night, and so I was sticking to it. The last week has been torture, because now apparently I am responsible for throwing the whole marriage away. It is 100% my decision, and I haven't given her a chance to change anything. She doesn't want to split and will love me forever, etc. I feel so guilty about it, but I honestly do not see how things will change at all. And it feels like something broke inside me, and I just cannot get myself to feel anything anymore. I definitely accept that we could and should have communicated more in the weeks and months leading up to this, but on the other hand, it also feels that every time I tried to bring anything up, she would be immediately defensive and/or try and twist it around to be my fault anyway. So now, I'm sticking to my guns. I don't see a way forward from here, but I'm still racked with guilt about it all. She definitely thinks that I am the AH here. OP is not an AH for being responsible for the breakdown of his relationship with his wife. OP's wife is an AH for blaming OP instead of admitting that her anxiety is the biggest cause of this breakdown. OP did nothing wrong, and his reaction is completely justified. So, I would rate OP's wife 3.5 and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now move on to the next story from Few-Fisherman 4526. AITA for cutting my sister off after years of her disrespect, and I finally had enough when she was rude to my partner. I 21F moved in with my dad when I was 16. I started living with my dad, stepmom, and stepsister, 13 at the time. Let's call her Tiff. Everything was fine at first. No problems with anyone at all. In the beginning, I got along with Tiff. As a few months passed, things started getting rocky. She slowly started with guilt, tripping me to do things. As more time passed, she started with yelling at me, calling me names, trying anything to get me in trouble. After a while it stopped, and we started to get along again. We moved houses when I was 17, and she was 14. Tiff started getting in trouble with our parents. She tried to blame small things on me, like not cleaning the bathroom when it wasn't my turn. At this point, she started yelling at me again, calling me names again, and started to make rude comments about my body. Our parents tried to punish her for it, but it never worked. Tiff and I started fighting all the time because I had enough of it. But no matter what, it was always my fault. Our parents said Tiff was just having some mental issues and to be nice. I tried to be nice and remain calm. All this continued even after I turned 18. I moved to a different state to live with some family for a year. Me and Tiff seemed to fix things and become friends again. I moved back in with my dad after that year. Things were fine for like the first 2 months back. Tiff was still under 18 and got mad that I could come and go as I pleased. She slowly started being rude and disrespectful again. Tiff started judging for every little thing I did, along with everything else she had been doing. Tiff also started being disrespectful to my partners. I left a lot of people because of her. At the same time, she also started treating me like her mom. She wanted money all the time. She had to do everything with me. After a while, I got my stepmom's old car. It was used but still in good condition. I learned about some issues it was having after I took the car over. I didn't stress about them and made sure to let my parents know, so they knew I wasn't causing them. They told me it had been having some issues and not to worry. About 8 months ago, I met my partner 21M, let's call him John. After hanging out with John and explaining what was happening at home, he offered me to move in. His partners were also offering me to move in as well. We started dating shortly after. I took him to meet all my family after some time. Tiff ignored him unless there was a group conversation going on. She wouldn't even introduce herself to him. John tried to be friendly, but she could care less. About a month later, I got a new car. My old one went back to my stepmom, who gave it to Tiff. After a while, Tiff started blowing up my phone, saying I had to pay to fix everything wrong with the car. I told her I would fix the trunk because my friend had broken it. But I refused to fix anything else because it was issues that had been going on since before I got the car. She started talking bad about me to our family and started saying that I didn't care about my family and that I was a piece of crap. I ignored her and just continued on with my life. She started telling everyone that I wouldn't talk to her or our parents, but she was the only one that wouldn't talk to me. Or if she did, she didn't care about me and only wanted to talk about herself. After a while, she started calling John a piece of crap and that he was controlling and toxic. She also started calling him all kinds of names. So AITA for cutting her off after I had enough of her crap? Small update? I blocked Tiff on everything but her number a month or two ago. I only have her number unblocked, but it's muted. I kept the number unblocked in case something happened to our parents and I need to know. I talked to John about not going to holidays at my dad's. I feel bad for my dad and stepmom because they're getting punished for her actions, but I don't know what else to do. I don't want to go and just hate being there because it will affect our parents. OP is not an AH for going no contact with her younger sister. OP's sister is an AH for being rude and disrespectful towards OP for years. OP made a great decision to cut her sister off from her life. OP did nothing wrong and her reaction is completely justified. So I would rate OP's sister 2.5 and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump on to the next story from Communication Fast 987. Are me and my sister Ta H for trying to defend myself against my brother, but ultimately ended up riling him up? My family consists of me, 17F, my sister, 14F, my little brother, 7M, and my mother, 45F. For some context to this, my brother has autism alongside ADHD, and I have ADHD, so we often have clashed as I get overwhelmed, and he's hyperactive. He often comes barging into our rooms, so much so that my room and my sister's room doors are broken and no longer shut properly. My brother often has blowout/tantrums when we don't cooperate with what he and only he wants. Whether we already gave him attention or played with him for hours doesn't change anything. Today, he came into my room and began flicking my light switch off and on and swinging my door open constantly, which can become irritating after the trillionth time. So naturally, I tried closing my door slightly, not all the way because I don't even have the option to do so anymore. This causes him to have a blowout where he starts throwing his toys at me, wrecking my bedsheets, and knocking over my room furniture, chair, fan, etc. Eventually, my mom comes out to see what's going on and immediately starts accusing me and my sister of riling him up, when all I did was reject his offer and try to stop him from wrecking my entire room. At this point, the whole family is in the lounge, my sister at the dining table as my mom stands by her, and I'm leaning against the wall by my room. My brother alternates between me and my sister as he begins throwing and hitting us with his toy, knowing mom won't punish him as she tells us to just ignore him. I tried to, but I couldn't stand there as she let him hit me and my sister. So I grabbed his toy and threw it outside through the backyard door. He starts screaming bloody as if I had just his non-existent firstborn, and he starts punching and kicking me. I try to go to my room, but he follows me and makes another gigantic mess of it. This is when my sister started asking my mom to do something, as she just stood there, which my mom replied with, "Honestly, I don't care anymore. He's going to continue and I can't do anything about it." My sister tells my mom she can always do something, like taking the toy off him, but this is just disregarded by my mother. I then come to sit at the dining table, and I'm so overwhelmed with anger and sadness that I start crying and my mom goes on her whole, "Oh, we all have it hard, it's okayed my daughter" speech. Of course, I know we do, and I didn't even say anything about us not. But this just pulled at me and my sister's last straw as mom continued to let him hit us. She then made a pathetic attempt at shielding us by scooting over slightly and once again standing still. We then have a conversation that goes something like this. "Why are you letting him hit us, little sister? I told you to just ignore him." Mom, how are we meant to ignore someone who is hitting us? Me. She then begins to go on a whole rant about how we are ganging up on her and about how we should defend ourselves. We tell her that when we do defend ourselves, you tell us to stop giving him a reaction, Exhibit A being me throwing his toy away as he hit us with it, and then question her as to why she can't take the object he is using to hurt us away. This time it was a toy, yeah, but other times it may be a chair or a rod he pulled out of thin air, or even his phone. She tries to threaten us by saying she'll call his psychologist so we can explain this all to her, but me and my sister are genuinely open to the idea, as we aren't afraid to tell the psychologist what's going on at home. My mom starts laughing, saying we are trying to make her the bad guy, and starts walking off, not having responded to any of the points we had made. My sister and I ultimately went back to our rooms, my right arm covered in scratches and red from where my brother punched me. Another point to add is that whenever my brother does have a blowout like this, our mom usually tells him that she'll give him some candy in order for him to stop hurting everyone. My sister and I have called her out multiple times, saying that this is ultimately rewarding him, as he can link that bad behavior will always result in him winning, whether it be me and my sister getting in trouble or him getting a treat. I understand that my brother is 7, but I feel like a lot of his behavior alongside his neurological disorders are being enforced by our mother, whether she realizes it or not. Overall, there could have been some things I've missed as I was very overwhelmed, and in our households, this honestly has become a daily occurrence. Even while typing this out, my shoulder hurts so bad that I can't even find a comfortable position to lay in. So, are me and my sister the AH in this situation? Even if you think we are, what are some tips you may have that could be useful in this situation? OP is not an AH for defending herself from her toxic brother. OP's brother is an AH for being physically aggressive towards OP and her sisters. OP's mother is also an AH for not taking a stand for them. So, I would rate OP's mother 2.5, OP's brother 3.5, and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now move on to the next story from Broad_Sir 556. AITA for telling my niece about emancipation? My 39F Silan 43F is telling me that I am the asshole for telling my 15-year-old niece Jane what emancipation is. Context: Jane got hospitalized for self-harm. I got to visit her along with my 17-year daughter Lynn while she was in the hospital. When I got there, I asked Jane how she was doing. She said, "I just can't go home." We sat and talked for about an hour. I told her we loved her, that we were concerned for her, asked her what she needed, and how we could help. My biggest thing was, I wanted her to know she was not alone, and that I understood where she was at. In my teen years, I struggled with depression and tried to kill myself several times. I also had an abusive home life, and realized later in life that most of my depression was related to that. Knowing that Jane didn't know any of that, I told her my story. Later that weekend, I saw Anne. I tried to talk with Anne and tell her what Jane and I talked about. With Jane's permission, I told her that Jane said she needed space and didn't want to come home. I told her that Jane is always welcome in our home, and that even if she doesn't stay with us, it would probably help Jane to have somewhere else to go. Anne didn't seem like she could handle the conversation, or that she flat out didn't want to have it. Nodding, giving half smiles, avoiding eye contact. I knew she probably had a lot of her own feelings she was dealing with, and didn't go into too much detail because of that. We talked in the phone later that night. Anne had a question about Jane that I answered, and that tied into what I had tried discussing earlier. I again tried to gently have the conversation, but didn't press it. Fast forward to 2 months later, Anne hasn't been talking to my family and said that she needed space to focus on hers, totally understandable. Lynn had a conversation with Anne where she told Lynn that she had a few questions for my husband, 40M, Thomas and I. Thomas reached out. Anne responded that she had questions for me. Anne texted me later and said, "What were the discussion questions asked at the hospital when Jane said she couldn't go home? I have an answer from her, but but I would like to give you a chance to answer. I knew that I had already had this conversation with her 2x, so I knew she was looking for something else more specific. I responded with, "Sure, what is the specific question you have around that conversation?" Anne, that was my question. Around the time she said she can't go home? What were you saying or asking her? Me. There seems to a lot more behind this line of questioning, more than what can be discussed over text. Anne, I just want to know if it's true or not. Me. I'm not doing this over text. If you would like to have a real conversation with me, I am open to that. Anne, I'm going to take that as a yes, even if there is more to it than you can share via text. Me. You're going to assume what you're going to assume. Again, I'm willing to have conversations, but not over text. Since I already set that boundary and you didn't respect it, I'm putting you on silence, and I'm not going to respond to this line of conversation. You can reach out when you're ready to have an in-person conversation. That was 6 months ago. Again, I understand that Anne has a lot on her plate right now, so that's fine. In those 6 months, a family member has unfriended me on Facebook, and another family member has asked if we called CPS on Anne and her husband. So, Anne is talking about it to others, and not us directly. Over the holiday, Anne texted Lynn to tell us Happy Thanksgiving. We reached out and said to not put Lynn in the middle, and Anne could reach out to us directly. It opened the subject up again, as Anne said she hadn't received an answer to her question about emancipation. I hadn't answered because we were giving her the space she asked for. If you've held on this far, here is what I said about emancipation. From what I can remember, towards the end of our conversation, not in the initial portion when Jane first told us she couldn't go home, Lynn asked Jane if she had made any friends in the hospital. Jane was talking about her friends, and brought up who one friend was arranging to go live somewhere else after their stay ended. Jane said again, "I can't go home. I wish I could live with you guys." I said, "You are always welcome in our home, but that ultimately is not up to me. It was up to your mom and dad." She asked me to talk with them about living with me. That is when I shared my story with her, to empathize, to let her know that she wasn't alone, that I understood where she was coming from, that I had dealt with depression and had tried to kill myself several times. I stated that my home life was rough, that I went to live with a friend. This is where emancipation was brought up. I brought it up in the context of my story, that I was looking into emancipating myself. I assumed she knew what emancipation was. I assumed this because she was in a group therapy session talking with other people about how to not go back to their living situations. That is where and how I learned about emancipation. I did see her eyes light and realized she thought that would be applicable to her and her situation. I explained the many ways our situations were different. I was driving and paying for everything but rent and some food already. I had 2 stable jobs, etc. I even explained that parents and courts would have to sign off on a minor being emancipated. I highlighted that it was not a probable solution to her problem. I feel even if I hadn't brought it up, she would probably have learned about emancipation in her group therapy setting. It's just a common topic. I feel that me telling her my story was not me presenting her with options. It was just me telling her my story and empathizing with her. The conversation was not about what can we do to get you away from your parents. The conversation was, what do you need? How can we help you? How can we support you? I did not walk in, sit down, look at Jane and say, you can legally become an adult at 15 as long as your mom and dad sign off on it. Okay, Reddit, AITA? OP is not an AH for consoling her niece and discussing her traumas. OP's sister-in-law is an AH for accusing her and questioning her intentions. OP did nothing wrong. She shows empathy and concern towards her niece, nothing else. So, I would rate OP's sister-in-law 2.5 and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump on to the next story from Alaska. _is_tired. AITA for going near no contact with my father, even if I know he cares a lot about me and is just mentally ill. My father was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and is a pathological liar. When my parents divorced, I was 6. I started living 1 week at my mom's and 1 week at my dad's. The divorce caused, or that's my theory anyway, a very bad hit to my father's, already fragile, mental health. He stopped taking his medication for bipolar disorder and started self-medicating with alcohol and drugs, opioids, weed, and maybe other things. His depressive episodes, combined with his alcoholism and drug addiction, caused him to neglect me physically. When I was at my father's house, I barely ate. Sometimes I didn't eat anything for 2 days because he was always passed out or high, wasn't hungry, and wasn't cooking or buying any food. That went on until I was 14, when I started working and could drive a scooter to buy my own food. The house was also very unsanitary, utterly disgusting. There was mold, old food, dirty dishes, drugs, dirt, and trash everywhere. He also smoked cigarettes in the house, so everything smelled like smoke. That caused me a lot of bullying in primary school because my clothes smelled like cigarettes were never clean, and I wasn't taking showers since using the filthy shower disgusted me too much. When I entered high school, I forced myself to start taking showers and developed a plan. I would bring all my clothes to my mom's, wash everything there, put the clean clothes in a closed bag, and only open it when I needed something while at my dad's house. I think that helped with the cigarette odor. There were also moments when I feared for my life because he would drive me to school drunk. We had a couple of accidents, but we never died. Yay. I also stopped having a proper relationship with him around the age of 9. The alcoholism and drugs changed him a lot, and that scared me. Particularly when I would find him passed out on the floor, which happened a lot. And like I said earlier, he's a pathological liar, so it was difficult to have a proper conversation without him lying about random things and frustrating me. Although I knew I hated living with him, I couldn't bring myself to live full-time at my mom's. I knew he loved me very much. I also knew I was the only good thing in his life. He didn't have any friends or family. I couldn't do that to him. I never talked about the neglect or anything else to my mom or anyone else until I was 17. Why? Because my father had a stroke. One day, my father had a stroke. Apparently, he had symptoms months before, like his legs hurting a lot, but he was always too drunk and high to bring himself to go to the hospital. The doctors told us at first that he wouldn't make it. So my mom went to his house to throw away food that would go bad and find his insurance and hospital card. That's when she saw the state of his house and forced me to tell her everything. I didn't tell her everything, but I did tell her that he was always drunk or high. Then he miraculously survived, but they said he'd be completely paralyzed and barely conscious. Another miracle happened though. He's not paralyzed at all. The only lasting issue is that his brain works much slower now, if that makes sense. What he says doesn't always make sense, and he has difficulty understanding us sometimes. It's honestly heartbreaking. My father was far from perfect, but he was so damn smart. Terrifyingly smart. He was a top computer engineer at a big company and managed to stay on top even though he was never sober. And now he's so slow and clueless. I know that sounds harsh, but it's just the truth. Anyway, his trip to the hospital apparently was a wake-up call for him. He's seeing a psychiatrist and a therapist, and he takes his medication. He also cleaned his house, apparently. I know he feels bad for everything, and he tries to make up for it in every way he can. He's always texting me sweet messages like, "I love you," "I hope you're having a great day," and he often invites me to dinner or the movies. I try to reply, but sometimes I feel like such a horrible daughter. It's been a decade since we had a proper relationship, and it feels weird to try now. I have nothing to say to him. He doesn't know anything about me. He feels like a stranger. And now I live full-time at my mom's until I finish nursing school. I don't plan on returning to live with him. I've had enough. But I know he's trying. And I know everything that happened was because of his mental health issues, but I just can't bring myself to give him my energy again. I don't have anything left. My best friend thinks I am the AH. She says he's my father, he loves me, and he's trying, so I should feel lucky. My mom thinks the opposite. She actually told me, "You already gave 11 years of your life for him. I think it's time you think about yourself first for once." And that really resonated with me. But I also feel like I'm an ungrateful. So, what do you guys think? OP is not an AH for prioritizing her well-being over her toxic father. OP has been a victim of physical and emotional abuse from her father since childhood, and it's not easy for OP to reconcile with him. OP's father is an AH for abusing OP since childhood. OP's decision to set boundaries with her father is completely justified. So, I would rate OP Father 2.5 and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now move on to the next story from cum_on_. Now 1. AITA for standing up for my friend to our other friend. I, 19F, and my best friend, 20M, who I'll call J, have been friends since we were about 9, so going on over a decade of friendship. We've seen each other through a lot, and things have been going fine up until I want to say a month ago. Me and him also gave another best friend, 19F, who I'll call Daisy, who I've known for about 5 years now and introduced them about 3 years ago. One thing to note about Jay is in the recent year or two of our friendship, it has been a constant thing where he would joke about how I would get tired of him, saying how he's waiting for the day I'll leave him for another friend or other people, and I've tried to make to where I would constantly reassure him that he was stuck with me and we would always be friends. His self-deprecation would occasionally cause issues because he would try to reflect his personal insecurities not only onto me but to Daisy, but it would mostly get swept under the rug because me and Daisy didn't want him to push us away. Up until a month ago, things within our friend group weren't going that great. Jay and Daisy were having issues, meaning that though they would never outwardly address anything, one would take a joke too far or say something the other didn't like, which would result in them coming to me afterwards to talk about. I would give my personal opinion on the issue, but I knew it would have to be between them to work, which wouldn't happen because neither of them is very confrontational. But it got to a certain point in which Jay was making constant jabs at Daisy because of an issue that happened at their job. To also preface, it was around this time he told us that if he ever did anything or said anything that we didn't like, then tell him. Jay and Daisy work at a restaurant together, where Daisy is a manager and actually got Jay a job there about a year ago. There's always something going on at their job, one focal point being how lazy their co-workers are. There has been one dude, Xavier, there that they work with that me and Jay used to go to school with. He was an annoying kid, and him and Jay don't really get along, but it's mainly one-sided. Jay doesn't like Xavier at all, while Xavier doesn't seem to really care or know that Jay doesn't like him. Jay talks about how lazy Xavier is, and how he does little to no work when they have a shift together. Now the issue with this is that Daisy informed me how lazy Jay was being lately, ever since he came back from school in May, always sitting down in the back, making a whole bunch of food for himself for free, that I guess they aren't allowed to have without the owner's permission. This has caused a lot of strain on Daisy, because while she is one of Jay's closest friends, she also doesn't want there to be conflict at work, especially if Jay wants to sit around and let every around him do the work. Well, the situation with Xavier came to a peak about last month when upon finding out that he would be working a shift the next day. With Xavier, Jay called me and Daisy just to tell Daisy that he wouldn't be coming in because he didn't want to work with Xavier, leaving no one to really help Daisy out in the kitchen part of the restaurant. She constantly asked him why he couldn't, and if he would think about it. But she eventually did hang up out of frustration. After cooling down and talking to me, I did tell her that she should get Jay to at least find a replacement to fill his shift, which he made such a big deal about. Now, while Jay has the issue with Xavier, according to Daisy, while not that many people do care for him, Jay is the only person with an actual problem with him. Jay has never expressed this towards Xavier, however. Only to Daisy, which he would say that she needed to do something about it because she's supposed to be a manager. Since his issue with Xavier has been progressing, he would constantly berate Daisy, always telling her that she should do her job and tell her employees that they need to work. When the next day comes, the day that Xavier and Jay would have been working together, I made it a point to call Jay to really see what was going on. He was reiterating how he didn't like how Daisy was handling the situation and that she could be a better manager, and that where I had to call him out. I told him that I personally didn't like the way that he was talking to me or Daisy lately, mainly referencing the call from the night before. I said that he sounds really rude and discouraging when he's nagging his good friend for something she has but so much control over. I told them that if the issue with Xavier was that serious, that he could bring in to the owner or even the manager above Daisy, who ironically enough Jay also doesn't like. I then ended with that, if taking about work makes him lash out at us as his friends, then he should talk about it with us, if he was just going to be mean. That was the last phone call me and him had. Daisy told me that her and Jay were cordial to each other at work, and things kind of went back to how they were before. But ever since I had that talk with him, he hasn't reached out since. It hurts that because I was defending my other friend, that now I look like the bad guy in his eyes. And Daisy, while acknowledges how rude and disrespectful it is that he's ignoring me with the radio silence, she won't mention me or talk about the situation with him because she's not confrontational and doesn't want to make things awkward at work. I get that, but in a sense, it makes me feel as though I'm now left on the outside because of an issue that didn't directly involve me to begin with. Not mad at Daisy, but just wish she didn't make me feel as though I was needed to be the one to confront the problem, because she would have rather it blew up in our faces. Realistically speaking, I don't know if Jay will reach out, because although me and him have been in few fights throughout our friendship, I have always been the one to reach out first, no matter who was wrong. I've even made it a point to not really call or text him, because I feel as though I'm not the one with the issue, and it's mainly him. Daisy, though she works with him, has already taken him out of her contacts and taken him off social media, but he doesn't know that, and she's hoping to end their friendship silently. Either way, the entire situation truly has exhausted and left me questioning whether or not I'm a good friend. AITA? OP is not an AH for being concerned about her friend Daisy. OP's best friend Jay is an AH for giving the silent treatment to OP. OP is just trying to resolve the issue between both her friends. OP did nothing wrong. So, I would rate OP 0 out of 5 and Jay 2.5 on the AH scale. Let's now move on to the next story from unknown Redditor. AITA for exposing my girlfriend's best friend's paternity scheme. I, 26M, have been with my girlfriend, Becca, 25F, for just over a year now. Becca and her best friend, Cindy, 25F, are both also close friends with Mike, 30M, who they met in their first year of college. Something about Mike always rubbed me the wrong way. He's polite enough, but I find he's too handsy with the girls. I brought it up to Becca, who says Mike is like a protective big brother to them. Since Mike has been Becca's friend since she was 18, her family love him and invite him to family gatherings. That's why I keep quiet, since he's clearly important to Becca. At Becca's sister Bianca's engagement party, of course Mike was there. While Becca was talking to Bianca, I went outside for some air. It was cold out, so there were only 2 people vaping. At the side of the house, I saw Mike and Cindy making out beside an in-the-ground solar light. I pulled out my phone and recorded 23 seconds of their make-out session before going back inside. On the car ride back, I told Becca that someone told me they saw Mike and Cindy kissing outside. She panicked and asked if I had told Stan what I was told. I said no, and she was relieved. I asked, "You're not surprised?" She said, "Of course not. Mike and Cindy have been off and on for years." My mind reeled since Cindy had only been with Stan for 8 months. Becca said Mike understands Cindy in a way that Stan doesn't, and that she covers for Cindy and Mike because Stan sometimes gets suspicious, which is annoying. I lost some respect for Becca then. 2 weeks later, I'm at Becca's place and Cindy calls her. She answers the call on speaker, and Cindy announces that she's pregnant. Becca squeals, takes the phone off speaker, and puts it to her ear. From my side, I got that Cindy was sure the baby was Mike's, but she plans to pass it off as Stan's. When Becca ended the call, I asked her why Cindy would lie to Stan about fathering a baby. Becca said that Mike makes more money than Stan. Side note, Mike owns 3 gyms and has a personal training business. Becca then says Mike wants a kid but doesn't want any responsibilities or to deal with baby mama drama. So since Cindy and Stan will probably get married anyway, this made sense for everyone. I was horrified and told Becca that she's just as bad as Cindy for covering this up. We got into a fight, and I left. Later, Becca calls and tells me that I'm being foolish for letting other people's drama affect our relationship. I thought we shared the same values, but that she is fine with lying about paternity sets off alarm bells. I don't see a future, but don't know if breaking up over other people's drama is the right thing to do. And I feel for Stan, who doesn't deserve any of this. I feel too guilty not doing anything. So, would I be the AH if I somehow anonymously sent the video of Mike and Cindy making out to Stan? Update. Yesterday, I posted about my GF Becca's best friend Cindy's plan to lie to Stan. Cindy's BF, about being the father of her unborn child, and about Becca's role in going along with the plan and covering for Cindy. After reading the comments, I decided that the best thing was to confront Becca and tell her that either Cindy tells Stan the truth or I will. Since today was Becca's day off work, I went to her apartment on my lunch break. Cindy was there, so I was able to tell Cindy directly. All hell broke loose. Cindy was screaming, and Becca was just screaming and defending her friend. They both accused me and all men of being hypocrites since we have bro codes, but we punish women for loyalty. I left mid-screams. Later at work, I was called to go down to the lobby because an irate man wants to see me. It was Mike, Cindy's off-and-on lover/friend, who is the real father of her unborn child. As soon as he saw me, Mike started yelling that I was a gossipy for meddling in other people's lives, and what him, Cindy and Becca do is none of my business. He was escorted out and banned from the building by security. I barely got through work after that. I replayed what he said over and over. What me, Cindy and Becca do? What? Was he sleeping with both Becca and Cindy? Separately? Or at the same time? Could they be some kind of throuple? I went down a rabbit hole and looked him up on social media, which wasn't hard since Becca tagged him in every pic. Turns out Mike is not 30 but 35 years old. That means he was 28 when he met Becca and Cindy at 18 years old. Could he have manipulated his way into their lives? Into their pants? Could he still be manipulating them now, years later? When I got home, I got a call from a strange number, but I didn't answer. Then that same number started sending me a bunch of texts. It was Stan saying just because I have outdated beliefs, it was no excuse to slut-shame his pregnant GF. He's talking about my outdated belief that there would be nothing special about my wedding night if I have unprotected before marriage, and so I always use protection. I figured Becca told Cindy, since they share everything, and for our 1-year anniversary, Becca said we should stop using condoms since she was on birth control, but I refused. Stan was texting insults nonstop, so I sent him the video of Mike and Cindy making out. He finally took a 4-minute text break before texting, "That was at Bianca's party?" Stan was there and probably remembered their outfits. I texted back, "Yes." Then nothing for 17 minutes before he texted, "Thanks." 30 minutes later, Becca started blowing up my phone. I turned it off, but I can hear alerts from my Apple Watch. I'm still reeling from what Mike said, and plan to confront Becca about it. In the meantime, I'm so mad I want to punch something. I'm so hurt I want to scream. I plan to take tomorrow off work to deal. Thanks to all who offered advice. If requested, I'll update when I calm down and talk to Becca tomorrow. Last update. I didn't know my first post would blow up like this, or my first update about my now EXGF Becca's BFF Cindy's paternity scheme. But here's the update. Since Becca told me off yesterday, I had turned my phone off and was ignoring all calls and texts. But from my Apple Watch, I can see notifications. This morning, I turned my phone on to respond to a text from Stan. I called him, and he apologized for his blow-up yesterday. He thanked me for sending him the video of Cindy cheating, and said he wanted to know everything I knew. After I told him, he said he'd already dumped Cindy, but now he wants a prenatal paternity test. I didn't even know you could do that. If the baby's his, then he will support his child. But until the test, he wants nothing to do with Cindy. I also returned a call from work and was told the man from yesterday, Mike, was pacing in front the building earlier this morning, but security must have spooked him because he left before the cops were called. Without checking her messages, I drove to Becca's and called her from outside, saying we need to talk. She agreed. I waited in my car forever before going to her apartment. When Becca opened the door, she practically jumped into my arms. She started saying she was sorry she yelled at me, and it was just her gut reaction to defend her BFF. But she doesn't want to lose me over Cindy's drama. I practically peeled her off of me and sat on the couch. I think I was just stalling when I first asked her what the original plan was for Cindy's baby. How would it benefit Mike to have Stan raise his kid if he himself wanted a child so badly? She said that Mike didn't want the full-time responsibility of a kid. So, this way he would get to be the godfather who spoiled the baby, and he would even pay for the kid's college later on. Then she said, but that's no longer the plan since Stan knows everything. But she quickly said, not that I blame you for that. She then said, Now that everything's out in the open, she wants us to get back to normal. I nearly choked at normal. I got to it and asked her straight up, "Are you sleeping with Mike?" She looked hurt that I asked that and said no, of course not. I then asked, "Were you ever sleeping with him?" She looked away. It was a gut punch. I just stood up and left. She let me leave, but she started blowing up my phone as soon as I drove off. She called nonstop and left several voice text messages. In one, she says that her hookups with Cindy and Mike are done for good now and I'm her future. So that's one question asked and answered. In another message, she wants us to move forward and thinks we should try couples counseling. I no longer trust her, but I still love her. But I also know that counseling can't rebuild trust. So it's definitely over between us. I finally blocked her on everything and might get a RO on Mike. The only good thing is at least now Stan knows the whole truth. So, thank you Reddit for your comments telling me to do the right thing. OP is not an AH for exposing the paternity scheme of his girlfriend's best friend's paternity scheme. Not OP, but Cindy is an AH for cheating on her partner and now lying about the paternity of her baby. She is an AH, a big AH, and I would rate her 4.5 out of 5 on the AH scale, and OP gets a 0. In fact, I would say what OP is doing is completely justified and valid for the well-being of Stan. Let's now jump on to the next story, from Fun. Use 279. Am I useless for not knowing what my next move in life will be? First of all, sorry if I have any spelling mistakes, or I don't know how to express myself correctly. English is not my first language. I am a 21-year-old young man who has been through everything in my short life, and I am currently lost. A little of my story so you can understand what is happening to me. My mother had me when she was 18 years old, and left me with my great-grandmother and my aunt, which they raised me with much love, understanding, and kindness. When I was 5 years old, I had an accident which had to operate on my throat. For that operation, my speech was very affected because I cannot promote some words, or I have difficulty speaking because I get stuck while talking. Shortly after that accident, my aunt married an American citizen, which made her move out with her husband, and I stayed with my great-grandmother. When I was 9 years old, I had an accident which made me fall off a roof, and they had to operate and put 2 prostheses, one in each foot, to be able to walk again. At that time, I struggled to walk and try to have a normal life of a child. By that time, my mother was already trying to come to my life with her husband and my 2 half-brothers, who are a boy 4 years younger than me, and my sister 5 years younger than me. At that time, my mother moved close to my house, and I followed my normal life. Since I did not care so much, and I did not have a relationship with her, I barely felt anything for my mother at that time. In the student environment, I have always been outstanding for being an expert in science, specifically in mathematics, chemistry, and biology. I was always in competitions from very young, winning scholarships, and being the pride of my family, I felt at that time superior to everything, because with 13 to 14 years, I could do college-level classes without problems. And at that time, I felt superior to everyone, until that day came. My great-grandmother fell ill, and in a few days she died, and at the age of 15 I was forced to go live with my mother, which I did not want to do because I did not get along very well with my half-siblings, but I had no one else to be with at that time. As time went by, I started to get along better with my half-siblings because we only had a few differences, but we were able to grow up together and have a good relationship, very close. With my mother, I created a special relationship that I will explain later. And what about my stepfather? A few years before my great-grandmother died, he got a good job in Holland, which raised our economic position to almost upper class. I finished high school with honors at 16 years old, and with many scholarships waiting for me from different universities to start my new life. But I was too stupid at that time not to accept it and give me a sabbatical year to know exactly what I want to study. At that time at home, I saw how my mother was unfaithful to my stepfather and doing a lot of manipulation and scams. I tried to get her out of that life, which little by little I was achieving. Although in return it cost me study time, and that she used me to use my name in her favor, to lie to get her out of her problems. I did it because she is my mother, I was not going to let her fall, and that her whole life would be more complicated than it was at that time. But well, this is where it all begins, and I am looking for advice and help, because I don't know what else to do. When the pandemic started, I was 17 years old, and I was already looking for a university. But as all the universities were stopped for a while, Because of the same pandemic, what did I do at that time? I studied on my own and played a lot of video games. I do not know how, but I got to earn up to $500 a week while playing Fortnite because I was very good at the game. When I was 18 years old, I was doing all the process for college. But a few weeks before starting college, I had a spontaneous pneumothorax, which I knew what was wrong with me because I was studying a lot of medical books and I wanted to start medicine at the university. I was short of breath. And I told my mother that I could not breathe and that I needed to go to the hospital, and she did not believe me and said that I am crazy. While she was arguing with me, I fainted due to lack of oxygen in front of her, and she took me to the hospital, and I arrived very bad, and they had to operate me in emergency. I lasted almost a month in the hospital because I could not recover and I had to go to the hospital for an emergency. When I fully recovered at 19 years old, I was ready to continue my college process. While applying to college, I also applied to several scholarships to study languages while studying medicine, and luckily I was accepted to study English while in college. I was very happy, and everything was going well in my life, but my mother was going to give me news that would change everything. She was leaving the country with my half-brothers to live with my stepfather in Holland. She promised me she was going to take me, but then she had to be living there to take me with her, and I believed her. A few days after my 20th birthday, she and my brothers left the country, and I was left alone in a third world country, with an income more than the minimum, since I worked in a finance company, and with few relatives that I barely spoke to them, but I didn't care. I lived in a decent house with many comforts, and my mother sent me monthly money to complete expenses and everything. To not be alone in the house, I call my mother and tell her if it would be right to look for a roommate, and she accepts, and I start looking for a roommate. Coincidentally, a cousin with whom I played online was looking for a place to live to get away from the countryside and look for a new life, and he came with me. And well, it was fun. We barely saw each other since I was studying and working early, and he was working, but we were always fine. At the end of my 20s, I had an accident which caused me to lose a specific organ, the spleen. I almost died in that accident. They had to make me a 6-hour operation, give me several blood transfusions, and I spent some time in intensive care, connected to many machines that helped me to be alive. When I wake up. After the operation, the first thing I look at is the face of my mother. She, since she knew what happened, took the first plane and came to take care of me and to see my recovery. After all, a month goes by and I am ready to continue with my life. Unfortunately, I was fired from my job, although my mother told me not to worry, that she will help me financially so that I can focus on my studies, which I did. In December of last year, I graduated from English studies, which made me focus 100% on my university career. A few months later, my mother told me that my process to go to Holland was finishing, and that in a few months I could go to live with them. I was very happy at one time to another. She came to the country to begin to prepare everything to go with her. I left the university to prepare everything. We began to sell everything in my house, and ready to go with her, only a signature of a document, which she was waiting with me in my country for her to sign and give me the visa to leave. But something happened the last day that we sold the last things I had at home. My mother had a heart attack next to me, which I knew at the moment that it was a heart attack. The first thing I did was to call an ambulance, and then I went to help her. When the ambulance arrived and I explained everything and her symptoms, they put her in the ambulance to take her to the hospital. My mother died in front of me, and together with the doctor who was in the ambulance, and I resuscitated her. Today, I still see her face when I close my eyes. I see how she vomited on her clothes, how her eyes turned white, and how her life was leaving her body, me together with the doctor working to keep her alive. The moment we arrived at the emergency room, I started to call the family, my uncle, brothers, and other relatives. While they were preparing to operate on my mother, the doctors called me, and I had to give all the information possible to try to see why this happened to her. But after 5 long days, 2 operations on her heart, and 16 blood transfusions, she passed away. The thousands of dollars I had to sell everything, also what I had saved, I spent to try to save her life. That happened 2 months ago. Since then, I am lost looking for a job, and they won't accept me anywhere. I can't be in college since I can't afford anything, and I earn money just by giving classes and science lessons to people in college. I am staying with an aunt, which I can tell it bothers her that I am there. But since she is my mom's sister, she doesn't want to tell me. I don't know how to continue. I just try to go on and on. But every day that passes, I feel that I am worse. And every time I get rejected from a job, I just come home to cry, and all my family just treats me bad and humiliates me, saying that I am not a man and that I should be working and studying. Man, that I should be working and studying, like before that, I am just a parasite, and that I am going to do badly in life. There are times when I just think about ending it all and taking the easy way out. I don't know what to do anymore, and I thought maybe strangers on the internet with a more neutral idea can give me some advice, or someone who has had a similar experience, how they got out of this hole. I would appreciate some advice at this time, and thank you for reading my little story. OP is not a loser because life is not the same for everyone. He has been going through a lot: emotional strain, personal trauma, and above all, loss of his mom. Handling all this, not an easy task. I would just say, keep moving, you will find your destination, and never lose hope. Let's now jump onto the next story from Own-Bathroom-3131. AITA for not allowing my boyfriend to see my ex-best friend? I, 17F, and my boyfriend, 17M, have been together for over a year. For some backstory, me and my best friend became best friends in our first year of high school. The following 6 years, we were inseparable. We would go on family holidays together, spend months at a time staying at one person's house, often mistaken for siblings. You get the point. After we left high school, we met our now boyfriends. For the sake of this story, I am going to call my best friend Eve, her boyfriend Dylan, and my boyfriend Adam. We were always friends with Dylan but rarely spoke or saw of him. Randomly, one day, we bumped into him. Following this, he asked us to go out with him on a couple of occasions. This led to the development of the friendship of us as a four: me, Eve, Dylan, and Adam. During the summer, we spent most days together. Me and Adam were sort of third wheels. Nevertheless, Dylan made sure it was no secret of Adam's feelings towards me. Dylan would rehearse to me most days what Adam had said to him about me, all positive. Despite being flattered by this, I was never interested in boys during high school, and this remained. I was what they called frigid, so I wanted to remain friends. Over the course of the next few months, we all became closer. Eve and Dylan had begun hanging out just them, to which led to me, and Adam hanging out just us two on a few occasions. On one of these occasions, Adam accidentally slipped up and told me that Eve and Dylan had, and that I cannot saying anything because it was a massive secret that was being kept from me. I was extremely shocked as me and Eve told each other everything, or so I thought, even things as small as our trip to the shop. She knew everything about my life. There is not a single secret she did not know. This led to me and Adam becoming much closer, until one day he eventually asked me out. Despite the awkwardness, I said no. Following this, he made backhanded comments about it all night, and out of guilt, I said yes. So now, me and Adam were dating, and Dylan and Eve were dating. We all remained friends, but did not hang out as a four as much. Me and Eve did not see each other as much as we used to, but did still continue to see and talk to one another frequently. On the other hand, Adam and Dylan's friendship was somewhat strained as it came to light to Adam that Dylan had been sharing his personal secrets to me and Eve, but they still remained friends. During the early stages of mine and Adam's relationship, I completely admit and take full accountability. I know that I wasn't knowledgeable on the dimensions of a relationship, as I had never had one before, and so I was not familiarized with any of the norms. This does not excuse what I did, though. As mentioned previously, I told my best friend everything. I continued to do so, including things about Adam. He found this out through looking through my phone. This led to an argument, but I still continued to do it. He found out again and then said I could not see her anymore, but still remained in contact. Upon reflection now, I can absolutely see the wrong in this, and I would feel horrible if the roles were reversed. Me telling her everything was my norm, but that is just a poor excuse, so I will not even try to justify my actions. Eve, she did get frustrated that we could not see one another. We did remain friends. Fast forward a few months, I woke up to a text from Eve stating that she really needs to see me and the police were involved. I was extremely worried and asked for more context, but she was not willing to share over text. That day, I was planning to go out with my parents anyway, so I left my boyfriend's house in order to get ready at mine to get ready to go out. I was not going out for another hour or so, and decided that this would be a perfect opportunity to see her. So, I snuck out to see her. This was not difficult at all, as we only live a 10-minute walk from one another. We just went on a half-an-hour walk, and she explained what had happened. The next day, I also saw her just to ensure she was okay, and I was extremely concerned about her, as she was not handling the events that took place well. I did not tell my boyfriend any of this, though I did consider it. However, I could not risk him preventing me from seeing her at a time like this. Strangely, that night, Dylan and Adam went out together. This was odd as they hadn't seen each other much during the course of our relationship. The next day, I went and saw Adam at his house and he was furious at me. Turns out, everything that I had been telling Eve, she was also telling Dylan, alongside personal things about me. Dylan then told Adam the night that they saw each other. This led to an argument. During that argument, I had confessed that I had saw her on the 2 occasions. He then messaged Dylan, to which they gave me and Eve an ultimatum stating that it's either them or each other. I was hesitant at first, but she immediately chose him. This resulted in the end in my friendship and the continuation of my relationship. Honestly, I took the ending of our friendship somewhat hard. It was like my childhood gone. In my mind, we are sort of still friends, and when I do talk about her, I never say a bad word about her, but I can still miss someone and know when enough is enough, because ultimately, she broke my trust. She has tried to reach out a few times, saying she misses me, but I haven't interacted with that and have continued on with my life. Instead, this gave me an opportunity to stop smoking, focus on school, and start the gym. All of which has been very challenging to adapt to, but I'm sure it will work out in the end. This leads to me to now. Adam and Dylan do not see each other often, but every few weeks. On one of these occasions, Adam and Dylan picked up Eve. I know this because I have both of their locations. I found it out unintentionally as I got a notification that he had arrived at her house, Life 360 feature, and checked. I was furious but remained very calm in this situation. I texted him a breakup, removed his access to my location, and left the house to go for a long walk. When I was nearing home, he was parked down a side road near to my home. This meant our paths met. I will leave out the following events out of respect and remaining very personal things, even though this is anonymous. As a result, I had no choice but to stay with him. Around a month later, Dylan's stepdad is passing down a small business of his to Dylan and Adam, as he does not want it anymore. This has meant Adam needs to go round Dylan's in order to collect things for the new job, but Eve is round Dylan's every time. This has led me to feel extremely uncomfortable. Earlier today, Adam went over to Dylan's, and Eve was also there. It was clear from things he mentioned that he went inside and spent some time hanging out. It had been playing on my mind all day, whether or not he had seen her, but I held out asking him until later on, in order to avoid an argument. A few hours ago, I popped the question. He got very frustrated and said he didn't, but even if he had, he wouldn't be following any boundaries of mine, as they are irrational and stupid. He then stormed out. Normally, I am the one to initiate the evolvement of arguments and be the first to apologize, but I haven't this time. I just do not believe I am in the wrong here, and am trying to see it from his perspective, but can't. So Reddit, am I the for not allowing my boyfriend to see my ex-best friend? Also, I'm terribly sorry if anything lacks context or clarity. I've written this down very quickly to get it all out. Please feel free to ask for clarification if needed. OP is not the AH because she is understandably uncomfortable with Adam's interactions with Eve due to past betrayals. Her feelings are valid, and while Adam's frustration is clear, he should respect her boundaries, especially after Eve's breach of trust. As for scores, I would rate Adam 2.5 out of 5 on the AH scale, and OP gets a 0. What do the Mac Reddit fans think? Is the OP an AH or not? Let me know in the comment section below. If you like the stories I brought you, just hit the like button, share them as much as you can, and don't forget to subscribe to Mac Reddit for a daily dose. Bye bye! See you tomorrow with some more spicy fries.